As we know, every environment has a unique soundscape, but what happens to that environment when its soundscape changes? And can changes in a soundscape tell us what happened to an environment? Every action has consequences, and those consequences are echoed out in their environment. Many animals have adapted to use specific parts of the acoustic spectrum to navigate, hunt, and communicate. For example, in the earlier video introducing Soundscape, we talked about how bats use high-pitched echolocation to accommodate for their low-light environments. In this case, if there was a new noise introduced to the environment that also had a very high frequency, the new noise may drown out the bat's vocalizations so that they won't be able to hear their own reflections and become confused, which could impact their ability to hunt and navigate. The same sort of scenario can be applied to many environments, even to humans. There are many places where people have introduced noise pollution and altered environments without even realizing it, but it affects us too. Noise pollution from things like traffic can have many adverse effects, like sleep disruption, hearing loss, and stress, among other things. Because of this, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, has outlined specific points in the Clean Air Act that address noise pollution directly and put in specific regulations to help prevent these adverse effects from happening. We can also use sound to monitor changes in an environment, though. There are many sounds that we as humans can't hear but still play an important role in the environment, like how dogs can hear dog whistles but we can't. We can use special microphones and hydrophones to record and look at these sounds to try and find out if there are changes occurring that we don't even know about. For example, windmills have been found to have very low frequency sounds that can impact birds migrating, and it is through this kind of monitoring that we can identify why some animals are being impacted by things we can't otherwise hear. Every environment soundscape is unique not only from each other, but also through time. The soundscape you may hear in an environment may be different from what you hear the next day, next year, or next 100 years. Things like inclement weather events may temporarily change the soundscape of an environment, while more extreme and long-lasting changes, such as traffic or construction, may permanently alter the soundscape of an environment. For example, bats use echolocation as a hunting and navigational tool by producing high pulses and listening for acoustic reflections from their environment around them. While this adaptation serves these animals very well in environments where visibility is low, their reliance on specific acoustic conditions put them at risk for unprecedented changes to their soundscape. This phenomenon was examined by looking at the impacts of wind turbines in the migration paths of North American bats in a study conducted, which caused significant changes and were monitored through the acoustic profile of their environments. Additionally, Klauper and a team of researchers found that the acoustic swarming patterns of Brazilian free-tailed bats differed as they conducted their daily activities. Another environment that has been increasingly altered by global processes like warming and shipping are underwater soundscapes. In fact, human-generated noise in marine environments is increasing so rapidly that the Animal Welfare Institute reports that in some areas, noise levels have doubled every decade for the last 60 years. And these changes are not without consequences. The use of sound for navigation and communication is an important tactic for many marine species because sound propagates much further through water than through air. When the ambient noise level in an environment is elevated, organisms must compete with these loud sources to survive, making it more difficult for aquatic organisms like whales to communicate, navigate, and identify other organisms in their environment. Not only does it interfere with their ability to hear, but in many cases, foreign noise is actually impacting their behavior. Ashworth reports in an article about underwater noise pollution that a recent study found that when narwhals are exposed to seismic air guns, which are used for surveying in the oil and gas industry, they immediately began diving to escape from the noise. These high-intensity dives use much more energy than normal and put the marine mammal's health at risk. Though many of the increasing instances of whale and dolphin strandings, decompression sickness, and behavioral changes have been attributed to climate change at large, more and more studies are revealing that marine sound plays a major role in the environmental pressures that these populations are already facing. One important aspect to consider when analyzing the environment is the evolving and changing elements of the world, climate, and soundscape. Amidst the changes occurring across many environments spans the question of conservation. That is, what elements of an environment are important for conservation, and what resources should be expended in pursuit of conservation or restoration. Monitoring is used in conservation and restoration efforts, and acoustics is increasingly becoming an easily deployable, less expensive, and non-invasive method for environmental monitoring, especially in more remote areas like islands. Broker et al. Took place in a study that determined the effectiveness of monitoring Soundscape to assess the recovery of nocturnal seabirds in the Aleutian Islands after efforts to remove invasive predators. They found that the acoustic richness measuring temporal entropy and amplitude increased with time since predator removal, and that these factors and moonlight accounted for 30% of variation in cumulative spectral difference from the reference island. This variation is a degree that is very noticeable in monitoring efforts, and while not all of the important factors for restoration were accounted for in acoustic monitoring, this team concurred that soundscape indices became part of the expanding acoustic monitoring toolbox to cost-effectively measure restoration outcomes at scale and in remote areas. Outside of a method for monitoring, some scholars have found that the acoustic profile of environments are themselves elements of an environment that have significant ecological and social value, that require their own conservation efforts. Some argue that soundscape poses both ecological and social value, and that they should be considered natural resources worthy of management and conservation, due to their sense of place, cultural significance, interactions with landscape perceptions, and role in wildlife well-being. Because of the wide-reaching impacts of environmental acoustics, awareness about the topic should be spread to garner greater interest and concern in the topic, especially in modern times where environmental and climate changes are so prevalent.